Hello and welcome back to our podcast, Ayahuasca Assisted Therapy. And I'm here today with Bob Cohen from Ouroboros Story Hour. And I'm so excited, to have this conversation. We tried to actually connect once, and the gods of the universe and the
Mhm.
sound system and technology just didn't, we're not contributing so well. So we are doing this recording, but I believe everything is in perfect timing. So I'm happy to be here with you, and welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me, Nina. It's a great treat to get to talk about all this about medicine. Um, in the default universe, not everyone understands what we're talking about. So nice to it's nice to be able to connect with people who are sort of in the know, as it were.
Thank you. Yeah, and let's start with your more personal story, because I know that you are an educator and a writer and a teacher. So, how was your journey? What brought you to the medicine, and how did you end up being involved in this whole scene to begin?
Not by any design of my own, I can tell you that for sure. The universe decided that my wife and I needed our asses kicked in 2008. And so she was foremost expert in the country on attorney certification. She ran a national nonprofit. It was the foremost organization. She hurt the feelings of the president of the board of directors in a meeting, and then he spent a year dismantling her career, turning her into a pile of goo, engineering her ouster. And at that time, she was the breadwinner of the family. I'm a writer, so when it came time to have a family, we both agreed that she was the one with the stable job and the health insurance, and I was the one with the cool job. So I stayed home with our kids, and so we hit this spot in '08 after she'd been working for the company for 22 3 years, something like that. Um, and all of a sudden, this 6-figure salary just poof went away. But in addition to the losing the money, kind of like the way that he did it, he destroyed her reputation and made it so it was impossible for her to get more work. And I was in my early 50s, yeah, I guess early 50s, and having we talk a lot about the mommy track, in career world. Well, the daddy track is even worse because men look at people like me and they go, well, what the hell's wrong with you? Why didn't you work for almost 20 years? And it was all because this was the best situation for our family. And so it created a situation where my wife was profoundly emotionally injured. She was injured in her career. We were we lost our main source of income, and I couldn't compensate for that because you don't plug back into the career world, not having worked at a company for 15, 16 years, and get a couple $100,000 salary. So from um, from '08 to about 2014, so that's like we were in constant danger of losing our home. Could barely pay our bills. Honestly, I don't. I look back at it. I don't know how the hell we survived. But at the end, when we hit that, when we hit 2013, I ended up having been diagnosed with severe atherosclerosis. So that's clogging the arteries. So 3 of my 4 arteries were they were 99% clogged, and so uh, we didn't have health insurance at the time, and I was like, oh well, I guess I'm going to die because I didn't want to leave my family with medical debt. And um, through some miracle, and we were talking before about coincidences, right? So we kind of made a little too much money to qualify for what we call mass health, or people call Obamacare now. So my wife called every couple 3 weeks and just talked to people and talked to people and talked to people. She met a woman in the last go around. She met a woman named Luce, Luce, which is light in Spanish, right? And she I don't know how she did it. I mean, I'm not sure what she put in for income, but somehow or another got qualified. I ended up like 2 days later, at one of the best hospitals in the world for atherosclerosis. The guy that I did it was like the top guy for doing for putting in stents. So they were able to stent me instead of crack my chest and do a bypass. And then I came home, and I thought that like between between realizing that I wasn't going to die, and it felt like things were sort of like moving in a good direction. And when I came home from the hospital, I found out that my wife hadn't been paying the mortgage again. So I kind of like spiraled. It was just went. So that kind of gets like from December to the summer, I'm really like I'm cooked now. Like I just I just with all the stress and the disappointments and the life's not fair stuff, I just was like totally cooked. So I happened to come across a couple of articles in Washington Post, I think, about NYU psilocybin research, and I thought, like it piqued my curiosity. Like I was always a beer guy when I was young. I didn't do drugs, and so but it's somewhere along the line I had an opportunity to try mushrooms once, and I remembered that experience, and I kind of remembered the vision that I had, and I thought, and it's really funny how it happened, because I just knew that this was right. And I just knew that that this was going to be the thing that was going to make the change for me. Kind of in the same way that my wife tells me that the day she met me, she knew she was going to marry me, and believe me when I tell you, I was a moving target in those days, and so I just knew it was like what like the something lit up. Actually, not out here. It was inside. Like I felt this thing in my heart, and I found myself in a situation where I was in my 50s and had no ability to obtain the substances because I'm out of that, right? Like I'm not young anymore. Like there was a time I knew drug dealers. There was a time where I knew people who knew drug dealers, and I had reached a time in my life where if I asked a young person for drugs, they would assume I was a cop. So there I was. And I didn't know what the hell to do. So I did what I do because I'm a writer, and I started doing research. And I discovered at that time, a little psychedelic conference called Horizons Perspectives on Psychedelics. And it was held in New York, a Columbus Day weekend. Now we say Indigenous Day, Indigenous Persons Day, but then we called it a Columbus Day. So that mid-October meeting. And I didn't have money. But I had some family there, so I kind of figured out that, and the tickets were super cheap. So I went to my family in New York, traveled back and forth to the city to this conference. So in one of the days, actually it was the first day, it was on Saturday. The NYU team was giving their talk, and then they had a Q&A at the end, and I got up to the mic, and it was a cheeky question. I got a good laugh out of the room, but I fundamentally asked the room where I could score drugs. So it caused it sent a ripple through the room, and I later found out that a lot of people thought I was a cop when I did that. But one person really saw me, and her name is Mary Kay, and I have permission to use her name. So so just so you know, and she came up to me at the end of the day, and she said, "I hear you. I see you. I was there. I know somebody. I wanted to meet you." And I shared some of my story, and she said, "I'm going to talk to my friend, and I'll touch base with you tomorrow." So you know how it is at conferences and when you meet people, like they say they're going to do stuff, and maybe they do, and maybe they don't. The end of the next day comes around. The first day was at the Judson Memorial Church right in Washington Square. The second day was at the New School, which is also in the Village. So we're at the New School at this beautiful auditorium. I head on out, and she comes up to me and she goes, "I talked to my friend. I can connect you." And so she gave me an email address, and there was some code words that you had to put in the subject of the email, so that the recipient knew that I was I was in, like I knew the password, right? So I connect with him, We back and forth from October till January, and finally we agreed to that I would come back to New York and go to his apartment in the Upper West Side and have an experience. So this person's name I won't mention, but he was a well known trip sitter in New York.
And this was with psilocybin.
Yep, right. So this is where we started, right? So I go, and there was some conversation about dosage with somebody else I had, and she was like, "Oh, you got to do 7 grams because it's really gonna, it's really gonna do you." So I get to this guy's apartment, and I inform him what this mutual acquaintance of ours said about dosage, and he goes, "Oh no," said 2.5 grams will be more than enough for you. So I said, "All right." I took the 2.5 grams, and I got caught in kind of like in one of those loops. So he said, "You want more?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, okay." So I have this really profound. I mean, it's that experience that a lot of people talk about with with psychedelics, where magic happened. It was just, I mean, stuff happened. Like, it moved a lot of stuff really fast, and it kind of left me like, wow. I lost weight in my soul in a way, I guess is how I would think of it. Like, I just felt lighter, and it was the most extreme. I don't even, I don't have words for it. I've used lots of words to try to describe what happened, but it just, it moved stuff that was hanging around. And interestingly enough, I thought I had daddy problems because my father was like mean and overbearing, and he viewed me as soft because I'm sensitive, and I always thought I had daddy problems. Only it was this other thing, and when I saw that, and then I saw it kind of like all disappear, it was like, okay, now I can begin. And to me, one of the most interesting things that happened in that experience was that first vision I had on mushrooms in 1980, when I was sitting in a canoe in an inlet in Bremerton, Washington, all by myself, came back to me exactly what it was. It was like, what it was I was sitting in a canoe, and I saw this duck kind of like moving around the points of the compass, and kind of like telling me, like, look around, like helping me figure out what my path was. And there's this idea there's this when in sailing before GPS, when ships would leave the harbor, they would do what's called boxing the compass. So that meant you oriented yourself and you made sure that your compass was working as it was supposed to be. The second experience became the other half of the boxing of the compass, and this path started to open up for me. And what I had to do, because I didn't have contacts, was I had to learn how to grow my own mushrooms. And I did. And I kept on going back to the Horizons conference. And about 3 years into it, I became friends with a guy named Lex Pelger, whose name I have permission to use as well. He works for, I'm having a middle-aged moment, Symposium. He worked for Symposium, and he did these psychedelic storytelling things. And so we were talking about it, and we were remembering that day, my first day at Horizons, and he said, "I'm having an after party on Sunday night, so why don't you come along?" So here I am, middle age, getting to be with all the cool kids in Brooklyn, at an apartment in Bed-Stuy. We talk, we get around, and he says, "I want you to come back and tell the story." So I said, "Okay, I do." So I couch surf at his place again. I do the thing in Brooklyn, and then coming into that following spring, I met a bunch of folks in Boston who were involved with an organization called the Boston Entheogenic Network, and in connecting with them, it created an opportunity for me to create Story Hour. Because what happened was, in case you haven't figured out, I like to talk and I like to tell stories. And I knew that if I waited around for other people to invite me, my wait would be long. And I said, well, let's just make it happen. And so then Story Hour got created in 2017. and that sort of like began this new process. So as I kind of like got connected with the Boston community, I then got to have access to other opportunities. So one of which was to an ayahuasca ceremony, um, and it was with a woman. I probably shouldn't mention names because she carries medicine into the States, but she's based out of Brazil, practices. She practices something called Umbanda, or actually Umbandaime, um, and that was like kind of like that next experience. Like, holy shit! And that year, so that we're getting into 2018, I somehow or another managed to go to an ayahuasca ceremony just about every month. And if it wasn't ayahuasca, and again through these connections, I also then got access to San Pedro and worked with someone based out of Ecuador. And what I feel like has been really lucky for me is that I got connected to ethical medicine carriers, for well trained medicine carriers, right? Because a lot of what I see is I've subsequently seen with people is that they meet, they want to do ayahuasca. They know some gringo that went to Peru for 2 weeks and learned how to be a shaman, has a certificate and everything, and said, yeah, I'm a shaman now. They know how to brew the tea, but they haven't done their own work. So my friend from Brazil, she grew up in the Umbanda church. So she didn't serve medicine until she was given permission by the people who were training her. And the same thing with my people in Ecuador. The couple that does it, the husband he's an indigenous chief, grew up in that tradition, and was kind of like bringing from the South, kind of bringing that here to the States to do what they could to help heal the world. And there it's been. And I mean, I have subsequently traveled to Ecuador to work with Santi and Andrea, and I went to Brazil last March during Carnival. So the retreat was called Carnicora. So Carnival, Cora, is cure, and we spent a week working with medicine, working with what the Brazilians call daime, working with the daime twice a day for a week on a farm, 4 hours outside of Sao Paulo, and it's just been like, wow.
Wow. Like, I have so many questions, and I want to hear more of your story. So, my first question is that something that you mentioned, that after your first mushroom experience, it was like a weight has been lifted and the path started to open, and you mentioned how kind of your life was in a kind of state of collapse, before this
Yeah.
experience. You were literally called to the medicine, as we always talk about the calling, and this heart thing, this intuitive thing that we are feeling. And then that was kind of your opening the door, and then this path started to widen, and other plant teachers and human teachers came in. So how did that translate in your life, like you starting to work with the medicine, creating the story hour and something? How did that manifest in your everyday life? How did your life change, like on a practical level, thanks to these experiences?
Oh, so many things. I mean, the big thing was that dark cloud of despair dissipated. When things are really bad, and when one thing I didn't mention, in the kind of like the lead up to Horizons in 2014, was I was in my garage with a rope around my neck. I mean, and I don't do it anymore, but I used to rock climb. So I set up gallows that the knots would have held, and I directed the force, and if I had kicked the ladder out from under me, that would have been it. And I didn't do it because I didn't want my children to come home and find me, because they were still in school. And so get like when I discovered, when I discovered through my reading that this psilocybin thing was out there, it was just sort of like, okay, because the psych meds that the doctors were giving me made me worse. And I went to I didn't mention this either. I was I actually ended up in a partial admission psych thing. And when I started talking about the ayahuasca and psilocybin, they actually threatened to commit me because they thought I was drug seeking. So but like I knew, right? So I have this experience, and this stuff kind of like this the a big weight, like not all of it. This is, everybody needs to understand that this is a process that all psychedelics are not a one and done thing, right? But in that sort of like in that shedding of this very heavy weight, the way I related to people changed. The way the way I carried my fears around our family's well being changed, because I felt like, okay, there's a way out of this if I do the work. So I became more pleasant to be around. I became more hopeful, and I also and I'm this was another one of the blessings from that time. Like everybody else, like I've been to therapy off and on, like most of my adult life, but the therapist I met when I got out of the partial inpatient admission, we've been working together ever since. She was amazing, and so she kind of like helped me start my writing again. So I'd been a writer for a long time. I'd written novels, was published, full time freelance writer, and all that stuff. And then I didn't write for a long time. And since May of 2018, I've missed. Let's get wackier. I've missed maybe 7 days of writing. I made a commitment to write every single day, and so that happened. I mean, that happened, and I've written, because I counted it not too long ago. I'm getting into about 9,000 pages of stuff. That's 1,000 pages of stuff, millions and millions of words since I resumed. Right now, I've got 3 completed collections of poetry that I'm trying to market right now. I'm working on a 4th one. I've got a novel in the can that I'm bringing back out, and I'm working on a memoir about my medicine experience. So, wham, right? And then in terms of the other aspects of my life, I kind of found my path, right? So like I always wanted it was always my intention to teach college, and I kind of like got off that for different reasons. I found my way back to that, and I created and I created Story Hour, and just month to month to month to month, it just like it built and it built and it grew and it created its own momentum. And so here we are. So by 2015, because I had a big problem with money, I just like made me nervous. So by 2015, I had to take over the task of doing the bills, and I've not missed a payment for anything since 2015. Like not a one. Like mortgage is squared away. I mean, there's been some damage from that, like because we had to with our mortgage, we had to. It's called a mortgage modification. And so, we were in our house like 15, 16 years. And, if you know anything about mortgage loans, there's an amortization curve, right? Like in the beginning, you pay more interest. Toward the end, your payments go more to principal. So they set that back to 0. But I got to keep my house. We got to have a solid place for our children to grow up. And for them to not have that disruption of what could have happened. And it was the medicine work. And when I say medicine work, like the substances are part of it, the community is part of it, and the story work is part of it. For me, stories are medicine.
Yeah, tell me a little bit more about that and the other parts of this healing work. As you said, like that you had a therapist, for a
Mm-hmm.
long time you have been therapying before, that was something that you did in conjunct with, going to ceremonies. Then you have this supportive community, and that was big part of it. So let's talk a little bit about that, because I think a lot of people focuses on the ceremony and
and the substance is right. So it's like integrations become a buzzword, and what happens with buzzwords is they tend to lose their impact and their sort of like force of meaning. But what happens in ceremonies, what happens when we take these substances is that we're communicating. I could lean harder toward the sort of the science and psychology of this rather than the spiritual, although that kind of like that meter moves back and forth. But the way I look at it most of the time in my default reality is that medicine, those substances, give us access to the our unconscious minds, and our unconscious minds don't speak in French, English, Portuguese, Romanian, Arabic, Chinese. It's its own language, and so part of part of the work of deriving the most benefit from working with psychedelics, working with ayahuasca or any of them, is you have to learn to speak. I call it learning. I've been learning to speak Bob, right? Like I need to understand like what those symbols mean. And it's sort of like when you think about like people, like they have dreams and then they'll go to a dream book and they'll say what's a snake mean? What's a hawk mean? And there is that cultural thing, that Jungian, collective unconscious thing, and that operates, I think. But at the same time, we have to understand what those symbols mean to us idiosyncratically. And that doesn't happen by accident. That's something that requires work to do. So I wrote every day. I was blessed, especially in 2017, 2018. I was blessed. And actually, let me dial that back. 2014 going into 2015. I was blessed with a therapist who was open to medicine being a part of our work.
And your therapist had personal experience with
Actually, I want to send this a copy of this when it gets done, because we have this ongoing thing where she won't tell me, and it comes up from time to time, and I'll go, well, have you? And she's, I'm not going to tell you. And it's funny. I mean, it's sort of an interesting thing for us, because sometimes it pisses me off. Because I'm like, Jesus Christ, like, it's no big deal. Like, you're not going to lose your license if you tell me, and you're not going to influence what I do now, because I mean, I've been at this for 7-8 years. She still won't tell me. But what she was really open to the work, and really open to sort of like the psycho-spiritual part of the journey. Because I said before that I kind of like I lean pretty hard into the Western framework for this, but these medicines, or they give me experiences that I can't explain that way. And so I like, never in my life did I ever talk about chakras. Like, never in my life did I talk about like etheric realms and connecting with people and energy and all that kind of stuff. And she's a yoga teacher also, and so like she was sort of like, she understood the language and kind of bore witness to my evolution in learning how to like bring that language into the conversation. And she was always open to what would happen when I would come back from a journey. So I'd go. Most of my journey work was pop-up ceremonies underground, blah blah blah, right? So you'd go do the things, and then on Monday or Tuesday, then I'd be in therapy, and I'd go twice a week, and we would talk about what happened, and we would talk about the experiences, and she listened, and that, like, having that place where I could process my experiences verbally, which is, despite the fact that I write, the verbal is my primary medium for thinking. She helped me sort of process what I saw, what I learned. And we did it over time. So I'm writing about I'm writing about what happened. I'm talking about what happened. I'm having these experiences. I have relationships with experienced medicine carriers, and with all of those things together, you begin to have more of the puzzle gets but more of the puzzle gets put up, and what the things are become a little more apparent.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this part of reflecting back to our story, which is verbalizing it or even writing about it. I do use this with my clients. I ask them to keep a daily journal throughout their whole process. I find this is like so important, and it helps us to be more present and more aware of what's happening inside of us. And then when we are sharing it, we also like expressing, in a different way. And oftentimes, new layers come up as we are talking about and sharing our own story. And when we're listening to other people's stories, that's another like really important point. As you said, the
Yeah.
listening part, it just really we find so many little parts that resonate and that we
Yep.
learn from, or that it helps us to connect certain dots and things like that. So since you have this amazing story hour, and I'm sure there's many people share their stories, can you share a couple of examples how this storytelling and sharing and being in community like can help people or help in their process, in their evolution, in their
Oh, it's so essential. Just before I kind of like directly answer that question, one of the things I've learned about human consciousness is that our brains are really storytelling machines. Our bodies are mobile sensor arrays. We smell, we taste, we touch, right? We walk around and we take in lots of information. Our consciousness tells stories about that information, and they make it into frames. And so whatever story you tell about whatever it is that just happened becomes what your reality is. So I didn't invent anything new. Buddha said that a long time ago. That and the way you dissolve karma is to change the story, to be present. Actually, I think for Buddhism, it's more like don't tell the story, right? I think that for me, you can't stay in those states forever, so it's important to tell stories that support your best life. So, what happens in that storytelling space is that people have an opportunity to think deeply about what they do, because my format is very long form, and I give people I tell people between 20 minutes and a half hour, and I don't push people around, but I tell them don't bring notes. I said unscripted. Find your story. You will find it, and I'm going to give you and the container is designed to give you enough time to find the story. Don't worry if you feel like you're not doing a good job at the beginning, if you feel like you're flailing, you will find it, and then when that happens, your story's gonna lay right in that Aristotelian story model. Beginning, rising action, the climax, falling action, all that stuff. Like it happens just by magic, because that's how stories work. And so in the room at a storytelling session at any given time are people who are, as Jimi Hendrix would say, who are experienced, right? There are people who are curious about it. And I'm sure that more than once they were law enforcement was in the room. I'm sure of that. But what happens is like that act of like telling and being witnessed and having the opportunity to kind of like think about what the takeaways are, what the story is from a given experience, really helps with people integrating. There's that buzzword again, right? It really helps people integrate their experiences more deeply. And I tried to like what I kind of tried to do, and this is a nod back to the '60s. the Kankisi acid test days. So one of the interesting things about where the Grateful Dead came from was that like they kind of viewed themselves and the audience as one entity, and they didn't separate them. So like they blurred the boundaries, and the acid was kind of like what helped that, and all the disorienting lights, and sort of like the whole shtick for the acid tests. It blurred all the boundaries. So storyteller becomes story receiver, becomes like there's this sort of like flow between everyone that's present in the moment, and then we make something together out of these out of these sort of like, if you can think of a person as a data point in the universe, right? Like these data points, like they expand outward a lot, like what happens when we take what can happen on medicine experiences when we have those moments of singularity, where you're a data point, you're the whole universe, like you're everything, and then you're actually, you understand that like there's something outside of your everything, and like you see all of this all at once. That whole tantric thing, right? Like the fourth level of tantric, whatever. It that's kind of what often happens in story hour. And so people will, I've had people come and say, wow, I learned so many things about that experience when I shared my story that I didn't realize. And I go, oh, this is perfect, right? Like this is what, and I've had people come to me and say, just knowing that this stuff is out here, it kind of sent me along this path. And, not everybody that shows up goes on to drink ayahuasca or take mushrooms or whatever, but they kind of like, it expands their vision, right? It gets, they understand more about the way consciousness works, and more about how so much of how we look at the world is based on the stories we tell, and how we have the ability to reframe the stories, retell the stories. You can't change you can't change the ingredients, but you can change how they relate to one another. And then you can change how you understand those ingredients in total.
Yeah, the perspective, right? You can look from a different
Yeah.
perspective, and that will change the whole story.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be the same reality, but you are looking at it from a different vantage point, and that will make it a different story.
Yeah, exactly. I do this assignment because I teach first year writing in college, so I do this assignment with my students. In fact, I was grading papers from this assignment this morning. I show them a 25-minute documentary about this boxer named Michael Bent, who never wanted to box. His father made him. He went on to become world champion. He got hit. He went into a coma, brain damage. He could never box again, and then that's when he discovered his true path, which was as a writer and a creative person. And I asked them to watch this, and then I asked them to reflect on this phrase: sometimes you win when you lose, and sometimes you lose when you win. And then I say, all right, let's think about this guy's life, think about your life, and then let's see what we can come up with. And it always leads to really interesting things, because people, like, we tend to think of like, well, when you win, we always want to win, right? Well, actually you don't. And actually, unfortunately, or I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this, because it hurts. It hurts when you lose, right? Whatever it is. But those things are necessary, right? Like those catastrophic failures are the universe telling you, you're going the wrong direction, dude. Go, go someplace else. And yeah, it sucks. It hurts. And like now, like this is what, 2022. So I look back to, and I've been reflecting on this lately. Like I look back to that time when everything blew up, and I understand now that it had to happen, because my wife was brilliant. She was very good at her job. It was a toxic environment, and she wasn't happy. She wasn't. I mean, we were comfortable. We stayed at first class hotels. We have thank God we got to keep it. We have a nice house. We have new cars, like all that stuff. But that stuff had to change, and so it did. Only I mean, it hurt like hell, but
Yes, that's such a beautiful example of looking at the same events, from a different point, and this, you with gratitude, and with understanding, and so can you tell us how your story changed, during all these years from that being the poor, sick, defeated, despaired victim of life, and what is the story that you are currently telling about yourself?
I don't. It's in constant evolution. um, I guess the kind of the story that I'm telling myself, it's kind of like my mission right now is to redefine what it means to age, because a lot of people when they hit I don't even like to say this out loud, but I just turned 65 in September, and you know I have to sign up for Medicare, which I don't want to sign up for, right? I'm still got lots of vigor, vital, all that stuff. Like I don't want to deal with it. So what I'm trying to do going forward take is to redefine what that means. Like I don't have to lay down if I don't want to. If I want to, I can, right? But I don't have to. And I view myself as, hold on a second, Alexa, stop. Sorry, I set a timer. I view this next section of my life as not an ending, and not even like not even another act. Because like a lot of people will kind of break up. Will say that that, like there are no second acts in American life, or that you're when you get to be my age, like you're in the final act of your life. I'm telling a whole new fucking story that's going to have its own first, second, and third act. And it's I'm gonna die someday. I'm gonna my faculties are going to fail me at some point. But and this was my first teaching when the first time I drank ayahuasca, because like the aging thing was very much on my mind. Grandmother told me, live your life until it's time to not live your life, and your body will tell you when that time is. Meanwhile, live your life, right? And it was I'm trying to remember. She gave me like a very specific phrase that I'm not remembering right now because I'm floating along on a big raft of words, right? But it was just fundamentally like just knock it off and go to work. Like not go to work, just be. Just be. So here we are, right? And we're actually in this moment we're actually experiencing a what I might call an aftershock from the original from the original trauma, because what and I can say this guy's name because he's dead now, so his name is Barry Nace. What Barry Nace did to my wife injured her so badly that she ended up having a long-term disability policy. So, in which we would otherwise be collecting right now, but the company that that's been paying out on the policy decided over the summer that oh fuck you, you're okay now, because she kind of went on, she had moved on a little bit, and she's doing some work, but it's not like what she used to do. So we've been bereft of probably about 70% of our income since August. So like we're kind of living off of savings right now, and it really sucks. But I'm not as afraid now as I was when that trauma first hit. And I kind of like even with this story, I kind of view it as a validation of the growth in the work that we've done over the past 14, 15 years. Because when the first shock hit, we were spending it as fast as we were making it. There was no savings, right? Like it was just new cars, vacations, like what, $100 bottles of scotch. I love whiskey. We were spending it as fast as we made it. So when the shit hit the fan, we ended up having to spend our retirement and our and our kids' college funds, and that all ran out eventually. And then we sort of like got down to where we were just literally living off of that policy, and then subsequently we've kind of like built back up on top of that. And as things started, as that opened up, we saved money. So when we had this last go around, we have been able so far to not have to change our lifestyle yet and survive. And we've hired a lawyer because it was a don't even get me started. It was like it was scumbag insurance company stuff. They brought in some guy that made up a bunch of bullshit. So we've hired a lawyer, and we the likelihood is that it's all gonna work out, and they're gonna have to give us the money that they didn't give us. But here we are. And I'm afraid it sucks. Like I look, I pay my bills, and I'm like, who likes taking money out of savings, right? Like, you're not supposed to do that. That's just supposed to be there for the rainy day you never have, so you can give it to your kids when you die, right? Um, but I feel less afraid now.
Mm. That's so important, I think, what you're saying, because that original state of fear and despair that you described at the beginning, I think a lot of people go through these periods of life when they feel that way and feel in that very disempowered, hopeless, like state when you really feel trapped in a situation and you don't see the way out and you don't think that you can do anything about what's happening kind of to you. And I think, like plant medicine, especially the ayahuasca, like really helps us to take that power back and to realize, that we do have a choice and we do have a power to write our own story and to make different decisions. And I always say to people that what I learned, the medicine doesn't solve your life problems and will make sure that you never have a problem again. But what it helps you to do is to help you navigate it in a different way. So next time when you are in a crisis or under stress or something, the way you're gonna respond to that, the way you're gonna move through that period and how you're gonna feel about it will be completely different. As you're saying, you wanted to kill yourself last time you went through this, and now you are like, we're gonna get through this and everything's gonna be just
Right.
fine.
Yeah.
Like a totally
Yeah.
different way of.
Right. I mean, don't get me wrong. I have my moments. I mean, when I think about sort of like the nature of insurance companies, like I know that the game that they played, the game is that because she has a high value policy, and so every so often they look at people who are making that much, and they kick a bunch of them off, knowing that most of them are probably going to hire a lawyer and get back on, but they're going to lose a few. And it is so fucking cynical. I mean, I apologize for the language, but it's so cynical because it's literally to save a couple of bucks. And you look at Unum as a multi-billion-dollar insurance company, and they're sweating our asses over this three, four, $500,000. Like, really? Like, and all the people that she's worked with, like, they're all there's one woman she'd worked with for all these years, and it's like she's going to get a bigger bonus because they fucked us over, right? And you look at that and you go, really? And I have moments where I want to knock somebody's block off. I have moments like I just paid my bills the other day, and I'm taking money out of the savings account and I'm watching it go down, and I'm like, well, we got to get this sorted sooner rather than later, right? Because otherwise we're going to have to start liquidating more assets at some point if we don't square this away. We're not young anymore, right? So my runway for takeoff is a lot shorter than it used to be. So it's really scary to think what would happen if this didn't work out how we need for it to work out. There's a lot less time and a lot less maneuvering room, particularly because like people don't want to give people my age a job. Like they think they think that that we have fixed mindsets. And I'm like, come to Vision Quest with me next year to Ecuador and sit next to me for for a week. Don't eat and drink for 4 days and 4 nights. Break your fast with a half a gallon of San Pedro tea, and then don't eat and drink again for another 3 or 4 days. And let's see who's got the flexible mind, right? If it's visual, you won't see it. But I just flipped off the camera. Like, screw you, because you're not going to keep up with me. But here's where we are, right? So yeah, but by and large, in this moment, I'm relying heavily on the work that I've done since 2015. And here's the really interesting thing. I've had a lot less access to medicine lately, because of the pandemic. And part of me really wants to go back, it wants to be in ceremony to kind of reinforce things. But I feel like the medicine's saying, look, we've supported you. You got to do the work now.
Oh,
We
absolutely. This is so gold what you were just saying, that you can do it. You don't need, to drink. You can and it is super empowering when you navigate these situations without any external
right,
crutches, so to say. And I think that one of the things that I learned from the medicine is that this kind of self-empowerment, that we go through, and the knowing that, oh, I can get through this, I can handle this, I'm gonna come out. And that's really something, that she helps with. Otherwise it would be just another reliance on something external,
right,
such as a guru or a teacher or any kind of substance. And I think that's kind of, really important, to understand. I'm really curious about, because I most of my experiences with the ayahuasca, but I also sit with all of the other plants that you mentioned. I do feel, for me, that there is a difference. Do you feel that there is a difference, specifically ayahuasca and other plant, and
absolutely.
verbalize it in
Uh,
what do you feel is
sure,
the,
sure, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. So I think of ayahuasca as a storytelling medicine, and when I journey, I can and I and I come back and I think about what happened later on. Like, I see a very clear story arc in the experiences, and I mean, from the science point of view, it probably corresponds to, the way we metabolize the DMT and all that stuff. But I see like a very clear, a very clear story with San Pedro. There's different medicines. So San Pedro's phenethylamine. So it's a different drug class, and we think of that as sort of more of an empathogen, a heart opening thing for me, and less of a storytelling thing. I'm aware that people have visions, and I have had visions with San Pedro, but for the most part, it's sort of this opening of the heart, which allows me to sort of like work with my psychic material in the stories I tell about myself in a compassionate way. Because one of the things that we have all been trained to do, especially all of us who come um, from Europe, and people, we don't, nobody in America talks about this, but most of us people of European descent came from peasants who had been peasants for thousands of years. We're carrying all this like really shitty generational trauma, and so part of that generational trauma really makes it so that we've learned to blame ourselves for our misfortune rather than just seeing it for what it is. So the San Pedro sort of like opens up my heart and allows me to sort of like look at the story without the self-loathing, without the hatred, without the anger at the circumstances. And then, when you do it in ceremony, and versus doing it home by yourself, you're with this whole group of people who are kind of like, whose hearts are opened as well. So my favorite part of my favorite part of the San Pedro ceremonies is not the medicine; it's the morning after, because it takes the half life on San Pedro is really long. So, and we drink a lot with Santi and Andrea. Like, we drink a lot, and so like we'll have like 3-4 doses over the course of the night. So after we go to sunrise, right? So after sunrise, we break the circle and then we talk, and the conversations that get had in that space are just so God. I hate saying stuff like this, but they're deep. Like, we really touch each other in a way that we don't. when we're outside of those spaces. And I mean, that happens with the ayahuasca as well, but it's kind of like the journey's a lot less defined. And even so, even if you look at, say, like mushrooms, so mushrooms and ayahuasca are both DMT based medicines or drugs, drug classes, however you want to refer to it. But the actions are different. The kind of like the profile of the experience is different. So like mushrooms, if you look at the effects curve, mushrooms has a very steep climb, and it hits the peak within about 2 hours, but it has an equally fast fall off. And so like the shape of the stories that come out of that are different. So I've explained it, I've explained it through the science. If you kind of like think about it, like we talk about, I refer to ayahuasca as grandmother, right? Like, so grandmother teaches differently from San Pedro, who is grandfather, who is different from Los Niños Santos, which is mushrooms, right? Like they all kind of like they work a little differently. And like I've done I've been experimenting a little bit with MDMA in the last 2 years, and that's like another one, like, because it's a phenethylamine like San Pedro, but it's it's a chemical, so it's like a little different. But that kind of like fits more in the San Pedro thing. It's more social. It's more heart opening. I did LSD once, and it's the only psychedelic I have done recreationally in the last 8 years, and it was a fun experience. But it was very social, and it was just a goofy night. Like I saw little elves and plants talk to me, but it was like not. It wasn't a teacher so much as a yeah, you deserve a good time tonight kind of thing. I was at a regional burn, and it was fun. I danced around a fire naked, like it was just. So yeah, so I think that kind of how I characterize it is that ayahuasca is a storytelling medicine, and the spirit that inhabits it, grandmother, like that framework. And we can say, all right, well, so the framework is, someone told us it was a feminine spirit, and therefore we frame it that way in our consciousness, and maybe that's true. I don't know, but it's just different. And grandma is not always nice. Grandma loves tough love.
Yeah, we can have a whole another episode about that. But for today, I want to end it with this question: that how did your family, opening this psychedelic pathway for yourself, and how did your family kind of adapt to this, your wife and your children?
That's a wonderful question. It really is, because I mean, there's a beautiful story in that, because when I opened up to, when this stuff came to me and I started talking about it, my wife, for both by her predilection before the trauma and after, she's a very cautious person. And she's a rule follower. So she does and so, drugs are bad, right? But we were at this point where, she was kind of like totally lost in her trauma and her sadness. And I was lost in mine. And I said, look, I have to try this. I said, and I didn't tell her at that time that, that I was like, I was millimeters away from dangling from a rope in my garage. I said, I have to try this. I said, because this other stuff's not working for me. And we have young children, and we have to make this work. So from day one, because she's kind of a nervous person and she's fragile from the other stuff, every time I would go to a ceremony, she was absolutely convinced I was going to die that night. And she would tell me so as I was walking out the door. And my young friends would say, oh, she's just trying to control you. You should leave her and all this stuff. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. The gift that she's giving me is that she says go. she's communicating to me that she is willing to sit with this abject fear of what's going to happen to me, because she's trusting that the the path I'm walking right now is the right one for me. And like let that sink in a little bit. Like, it's almost like was going out to war kind of thing, right? Like, where she was like, I don't know if I'm ever going to see him again, but go. So part of it was like, for me, like, my personal awakening was that before those depths, I would never have been able to walk out the door. But I knew that I needed to do that. And so that gave me the strength to walk out the door. She, I think, would have made it, in different circumstances, may have made it a lot harder for me to walk out the door. And I likely would have stayed, and it would have built resentment, and who knows who knows where things would have gone. So over the years, we this is like our ritual, and so I always agree to call her, and I wait until we break the circle, and then I always have someone standing next to me to make sure I don't say something that, because those are fragile mental states, right? Like, you got to be careful about what you say, and I'm always just like, okay, circle's broken, I'm okay, see you later. And we've kind of like gone on like that since 2018, where it's this kind of like movement in and out of, like, well, the death space. It changed a little bit when I started going to Ecuador in 2019, because I've been doing vision quests and working with San Pedro. So I'm away for 3 weeks. And I text her periodically, but there's no way to there's no way to do that, to for her to get the kind of reassurance that she might otherwise have needed. And so she's kind of like become a little more comfortable with it. And then this year passed, I've now become close enough with my medicine carrier to have her come stay at my home when she's in the Boston area. And so she came to stay with us earlier this year. And that was just like, it really, when Bobby met my person, my medicine carrier, and understood, like, really got to be with her and see what kind of person she was, and with her friend who helps her, it kind of like totally, I don't think she worries as much anymore. And I've asked her this question, like, well, what differences do you notice? So I was raised as a very typical toxic male, right? Like, you had two modes of expression, silence and rage, right? And the bandwidth was really, 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 really narrow. And over time, that bandwidth has opened up a lot. And I'm now allowing myself to be vulnerable, to say I'm afraid, to say I'm scared. And I think that, or I hope anyway, that, that's sort of like strengthened our relationship. But just as important is what I model for my children. So my kids are 26 and 22 now. So they really grew up with dad walking the medicine path. And I don't hide things from my children. So they knew. I mean, I grew mushrooms in my study up here, and told them what I said. I'm growing medicine because the medicine that the doctors give me doesn't help. This helps me. So they're kind of like, saw that. And they, I think, were given, they were shown a model where it's not only permissible, but sometimes essential to color outside the lines to make the beautiful picture.
Oh my God, I love this. Oh, that was so beautifully said. I love this metaphor, this picture. Color outside of the line to make a beautiful.
Yeah.
That's so perfect to just wrap up the whole plant medicine. It's really like going out of your comfort zone, going out of the known, of the familiar, going out of the box, going out of the line. I think that's very much describes in general these experiences. And I would love to have you for more episodes, because lots of stories are there, I think, that can be shared.
Oh, no, absolutely. It's actually, this kind of like thing is what scares me about what's happening in the psychedelic world right now, because I just went to the last Horizons a couple of weeks ago, and you know, with the decrim movement gaining, gaining steam, with different celebrities like making this part of popular culture, and with Maps being on the verge of getting MDMA rescheduled, all the finance bros are like they're foaming at the mouth. Like I said, like the blood's in the water, right? And I'm so afraid that the commoditization of the medicines, with the patents and the rules and like all these other things that are sort of like outside of the traditional approaches to this. I'm so afraid like not gonna it's not gonna work in the end. I don't think. I mean, you look at like something like Peter Thiel, right? The PayPal guy, like he just threw a shit ton of money at some psilocybin startup. Like, and so always have to ask yourself when wealthy people are throwing money at something, why do they do it? It's so that they can stay wealthy and they can keep their power, right? So like, what's going on here that that we need to worry about? So we like in these more traditional practices, like we have to kind of we have to uphold.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's also like can be a whole other conversation. What's
Yeah,
happened? We can bridge the gap between, the cultural, traditional use, then bringing these medicines to the West, creating safe places, having people with integrity, having, some kind of education around it. So yeah, there is a lot to share. Where can people go to listen to the
okay,
story?
right. So here, just so I to like kind of get this like back to story hour. So two things are going on. Um, I I started this in 2017, and I put on a show a month, every single month until like last January, February. I can't remember what. Um, because of the pandemic, I had no money coming in, and I was spending 30, 40 hours editing video and spending money on lots of different things, and the energy exchange stopped supporting my ability to do the work. So I've put Story Hour on hiatus for a while. I'm now getting ready to start thinking about. I'm thinking about it. I know what I'm doing next. I'm going back to live shows, and I'm also going to travel. So if you want to see the content to date, you can go to Facebook. Let me see if I can, because I keep my content both on Facebook and on YouTube, but mostly Facebook. So it's Ouroboros Story Hour, and it's I think that the way that you express the link is it's at and then Ouroboros Story Hour, all one word.
Yeah, we're gonna put your link in the
Sure,
description so
right.
people
So
can.
you can find stuff there, and then you can also go to YouTube and let me see if I can YouTube. If you can go to youtube.com/Ouroboros Story Hour, all one word, and that will bring you to the content that I have on YouTube. So that stuff is edited, processed, packaged as shows, and it's pretty cool. Like people will still watch it, and and I still get notes. I still get notes about that. So what I'm looking for though, like as I kind of come out of hiatus and start going into the live thing is, I have to do like some kind of Kickstarter so that I can fund the travel, because my ideas I actually want to do. I want to go um, south and host shows in Mexico and further south, because I want to make sure that the medicine carriers have a voice in the conversation.
That's awesome. So big shout out to all the people who are listening and going to listen to this episode. If you have any means, to contribute, and if you feel called to support this, I think it's very important that, those voices are heard. And it's a
Yeah,
beautiful idea what you have, then they can connect with you through your
yeah.
pages and just, yeah, collaborate on
It
this.
could, yeah, and so one of the like the coolest thing about the pandemic was that I had an opportunity to sort of like expand the people that would come and tell stories. So like I had a show once where somebody from Hawaii was calling at the same time as someone from South Africa, right? So like I've now had an opportunity to meet people virtually all over the world. So I want to kind of like move the show around a little bit. So we're going to start here locally, kind of like tweak the format a little bit, and get our get our feet wet. But I'm hoping come when school's over in May, like I want to spend the summer out having these conversations and these stories with lots of people.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us, because you're normally listening to the story. So it's nice
Yeah.
to share
So
your story. And yeah, I would love to have continue, more conversations, but try to keep, an episode around an hour so
sure,
people
sure.
can.
I'd like to leave you with one thing. So I mentioned that I went back to writing poetry. So this poem is part of a collection called Whiskey, Cool Jazz, and Ayahuasca: Excursions into Flow State. And so the gist of the book is sort of like different ways that we play with consciousness, and how we can sort of like alter it, and learn to play with it, and learn to shape it in ways that are beneficial for us. So I want to read a poem called forgive my awful Spanish, but it just is what it is. The poem is called Mi corazón es el camino de la medicina, which means which means my heart is the medicine path. And I start with an epigraph from Antonio Machado, who's a Spanish poet, and it's Comandante no he camino sino estelas en la mar, which in the prose translation is: Wanderer, your footsteps are the road and nothing more. Wanderer, there is no road. The road is made by walking. And this is like an expression of the discovery. This is what I have learned from taking medicine. So the poem reads: No road, only wakes upon the sea. Feels right just now. I long to know other languages so I can connect in thought with the healers, the shamans, the curanderos, and maestros who tread the path and wait for me ahead. Just as jazz lives in my heart but not upon my fingertips, medicine flows through my blood, while Spanish and Portuguese dwell in other chambers within its beating walls, but not upon my tongue. Still, I trust firm ground will rise to meet me, my footfalls, so that should I look behind, the connections will shimmer briefly in the fading light, and I will not fear to take the next step forward.
Beautiful. Thank you, thank you, thank you for sharing this beautiful poem. And yeah, we're gonna share your links and availability, and just blessings on your path and the further discoveries and sharing of the good stories and the good medicines. And thank you for being here today, and continue so.
Thank you so much for connecting. And like our connection was from this. I think we've never talked to each other in the real world, right? Or well, in three-dimensional space, right? But we connected from this, and I feel like the medicine brought us together.
Definitely.
And I love what you do, and I hope you keep on doing what you do. Thank you so much, Nina.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you all for listening. Stay tuned for our next episode, and check out my website, avatarhealingarts.com, for everything that we are up to right now. So see you soon in the next episode, and have a wonderful, magical day.